Hello! In this video I want to give a deeper dive into Proc R. We will not cover everything that is possible within Proc R, but we are going to step through what I consider the major functions and working methods for Proc R. And also, if you prefer the written word over a video, there is a link at the top of the description that takes you to a written version of this video. So let's get right into it. To start us out, I want to call out the Proc R documentation page, specifically the one around the callback methods, which is your main point of lookup and information around all the additional integration points that SAS offers when it comes to Proc R. But with that, we are going to SAS Studio, where we are going to start working with Proc R and kind of working our way to a more sophisticated example in the end. We're starting things off with, well, a simple Proc R, just using a submit statement, and then we have a print statement in here, and I'm going to zoom in a little, and we see that printed to the log. Then we have end submit and run statement. Very simple. One important note we can see in here is node R initialized. If we now rerun this code, we will not see this node again, because instead we see resuming our state from previous Proc R invocation. Meaning that as long as your SAS session is active, your R session also stays active in the same sub-process, essentially. And that also means that if you define a variable in one Proc R and then you have a later one down the road in your code, you can reuse variable between the two. It also means that the resources that are being allocated to that R sub-process remain. So we will talk about how you can clean up after yourself. But before we do that, let us talk about macro variables and how to get them and also return values back into SAS. For that, we are just going to define a very simplistic macro variable x up here. And then in our Proc R, you will see this x equals simget and then the name of the macro variable. This will pull the value of our variable into our R subprocess. And then the reverse method, simput, which allows us to first specify the name of the macro variable in SAS and then give it the value we want to pass along from R. And we're going to print the returned value from SAS into the log, and then also the value we get from R into the log. So let's submit this block. And here we can see we get the 1 value returned from the simget method, and then from R equals high in the log where we put the value into a macro variable from R. And finally, the last batch of big methods that we are going to talk about is the SAS dataset to data frame, abbreviated to SD2DF, where you just have to input the name of your library, period, table name, and it will be returned as a data frame into your session. And then the reverse function, data frame to SAS dataset, where you first give it your data frame, and then you specify the name of the table and also the library if you want to go back into SAS. And then finally, we can also show, meaning print into the results tab of SAS, the data frame here. And we can also give it a title, and we can specify how many rows are being displayed. Now, of course, the default here is 5, I believe, so I just increased it to 10 for demonstration purposes. So let's run this piece, and we will see here the printed data frame. This is the first 10 rows of the classic SAS help class dataset, and we are returning the full SAS help class dataset from R back into our work library. There is one more very important method that is available to return plots that you generated with R back into the results in SAS, but we will cover that in one of the later steps. So let us move on. Because oftentimes when you are starting to build out your R code, you might have the need to reset something because you want to make sure that your code is actually reusable and you don't have a variable lying around. You can do that by specifying the keyword restart at the top of your Proc R statement, and that will reset the SAS the R session within your SAS session, so you have a clean slate again. And that also means it frees up all the resources. And now we will see a corresponding note in here: previous R state destroyed, R initialized. So we do have a clean slate again. Now, if we want to only free up all the resources and do nothing else, we can just run proc R terminate to kill the R session, and now there is no more R session available, and we have returned all the resources to the main SAS session and can reuse them in different ways. Next up, you might want information about your R session. The first piece is the ability for the Proc R path that is set by your SAS administrators that will show you which R version or where your R is installed that you are interacting with, and you can easily retrieve that value from the system variable, and then you can see the base information where your R session and install actually lives. Always a good information to keep at hand. And if you have multiple R environments installed, this is also a way to switch between these different R environments. Now, of course, this requires elevated permissions within the session to be able to change this type of environment variable, so your mileage of availability may vary. Next up, a small helper script that will also be provided down below is the ability to submit SAS R code to get an overview of all the packages that are installed in your environment. I'm gonna hit run here, and we will see a rather large data set returned to us. I currently have 201 R packages available within my R runtime, and we can see like the package name, the version, the priority, the dependencies, what it imports, the license, needs compilation, and if it's currently loaded within your session. That's a super helpful script that I just wanted to highlight here, and you can make use of it if you want to know what's actually available in your environment. Now you might say, well, I like to code R, but I don't want to code within the Proc R block. While there isn't a dedicated R editor yet in SAS Studio, you might say you like to code in R, but you don't want to do this between the submit and end submit blocks, which I totally understand. You might already have R scripts available, so you can upload them into SAS content, like I have here with my hello-r.r file. And then instead of writing the code into your Proc R block, you can save it, and you can either pass it along as a file name statement. So here I have one example where it touches SAS content. Below is an example touching the SAS server. And then we just specify in file at the top of Proc R, specify submit and submit. And this will pull out the code from our R file, submit it, and then we can see here that it's also saying hello from R inside SAS. To view our R file, we can just click open as text, and we can see the content of our R code in here. Moving on, I wanted to finish things off also talking about the capability of returning graphs and visualizations back from R by really pushing the limits of what's possible within SAS, combining the power of classical data step, proc means, proc frac with proc Python, and then finally using R to visualize our results. So let's start off here where we are using SAS code to clean and summarize the SAS help cars dataset. Then we will move into Proc Python, where we be using a linear regression model from sklearn to train a simple model. This is nothing fancy. This is just for illustration purposes. And you will see we also here, we return the values back into SAS, the dataset, and also some macro variables for verification. We wait for the Python code to finish here. We can see our output datasets that we got. Then we are going to print the result data using SAS and also printing the macro variables that Proc Python returned to us. So we get some indication. And finally, we are going to be using Proc R to visualize our resulting data using the gplot method and then the rplot to visualize the data back into the SAS results tab. And also we reuse that show that we talked about in the beginning. So let me run Proc R now. And then we get our nicely rendered R result back in here. And of course, I now stepped through it step by step, but we can also hit F3 and just run SAS code, Python code, R code, and we get one unified result bridging 3 languages absolutely seamlessly. I hope, like me, you are ready for Proc R and have some fun exploring these new capabilities that the combination of these 3 powerful languages really enable us to do. See you next time, and bye bye.